if people are willing to just do what they can in their own space. You know, my space isn't, I'm not necessarily the stand in front of a car with a sign yelling, girl, not saying, but we need that person if that's what you're called to do, because that's, you know, their space. My space is, I love film. So use my instrument to help.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. She's a self-starter, she's an activist, she's a multi-hyphenate. Today's guest, Jasmine Leyva, made her directing debut with the groundbreaking documentary, The Invisible Vegan, which highlights her own journey with veganism while exploring the little-known history of plant-based eating directly linked to African roots. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and watch it immediately. Vibrant, eloquent, and, well, pretty badass, Jasmine has appeared in front of the camera, starring in commercials for such brands as American Express, Nissan, Apple, and Sony. She's also behind the camera as associate producer of the NAACP award-winning docuseries Unsung, and as producer-writer of the docuseries Being. She's also an excellent actress. She's a producer on the upcoming documentary Red Alert, The Fight Against Fibroids, which tackles the hard questions around fibroids and endometriosis. We're definitely looking forward to speaking with Jasmine today. So welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys for having me.
It's really nice to, Dotsie and I are both big fans. And tell me how you grew up in terms of food, because it contrasts very much how you're living right now.
So just so you know where I was before my film, I was that person, I would go to Chipotle and you know how they would have like 4 different meats, you know, like regular people choose one, but me, I had to have all 4 in one burrito. So so that tells you what I was eating like.
A killing machine.
And you ignored because Chipotle actually has sort of a meat alternative, I think, and you ignored those.
No, but at the time, they didn't always have, you know, because before I started with this, there were not all these like, vegan Ben and Jerry's, Impossible Burger. No, you didn't have that option. Either you're just going to get a burrito with just veggies on it, or I'm going to have my meat party. So I used to have lots of meat parties. Yeah.
So that was how, in terms of your family and where you grew up, that was very much part of your life, meat?
Pretty much, yeah. My family, you know, my roots, I'm born and raised in D.C., but my family's from the South. So, you know, the South, Southern cooking, you know, you're eating macaroni and cheese, you're eating fried chicken, and even down to like every Christmas, like we make chitlins. So like sometimes it got like real meat, you know? So
I grew up in the South as well. I grew up in Kentucky, and my grandmother made all sorts of stewed body parts and chitlins and all the fixings like you're talking about. But I've heard you speak so eloquently and is very intriguing on different panels about true West African diets, and how they are filled with all of the delicious plant foods that us vegans know well, and nuts and seeds, grains and fruits and veggies. But because of slavery that was born in the South, it was kind of, it's almost like the soul food in a way got pushed on Black people. And then that's the food choice or the food thinking of today, that you're turning away from your history by not eating soul food. And I would love for you to just unpack that. And I think I just did what you asked me not to do, which is ask 6 questions in one. Earlier, folks, she said, don't do that, but so just answer whatever you want. But it's just, it is complex. It's a layered issue. And you just speak about it so beautifully.
No, you actually broke it down very nicely. So, so to your point, when slavery came to America, you had this group of people who were used to a rich diet with fresh vegetables, fresh crops. They come here, they don't have anything. So they have to take what they are given, which was the scraps, use their ingenuity and turn it into a delicacy, which at that time, that was great. It was creativity. They needed to survive. They needed to be satiated in order to work in fields for a long time. So I would never discount, just the importance of soul food. But the thing is, like everything else, you have to evolve and you have to do what serves you. And what served our culture at that time doesn't necessarily serve our culture at this time, because we can use that same creativity that helped us live back in the day. We use this same creativity to give ourselves even more longevity. And we don't have to necessarily abandon soul food, but the manner that we cook it now, we can cook it in a way to make it healthy, like in a way that doesn't lead to a grandmother getting diabetes and having to have her leg cut off. We can ease up on the sugar. We can ease up on the meat. We don't need all the butter. There are ways to prepare food, if you know seasoning profiles, that won't kill us in our arteries.
I want to ask a wildly ignorant question that just stay on this for one hot second more. So I grew up with grandma's cooking, which was, collard greens with a ham hock in it, black-eyed peas, all sorts of meats. Chitlins was always on the table. Did white people adapt the cooking because it was so flavorful from the slaves, or is it the other way around? I don't know. And that's sad. I don't know.
No, you know what? It was a merger, because I think you have different cultures. Like now we're in the appropriation and everyone wants to be like, I started this, I started that. But really what happened was you had 2 cultures blending. And then, they blended together and created something, but you did have, the Caucasians trying to take credit for everything that was done, they creating cookbooks based on recipes that their slaves were making, or that their slaves passed down, calling it theirs, when really it's like, no, it was more of a fusion.
Okay. Thank you.
When in the documentary, The Invisible Vegan, when you moved to LA to pursue your career in Hollywood, you heard the word vegan, and you were in Hollywood, and it made me laugh out loud. You say in your documentary, your first thought when you heard that word was, that's white people stuff. So tell me why there's that association with veganism with white people.
You know what? Because you have to think of, maybe, you see how the health movement is promoted now, like not even just veganism, the health movement in general, like it is definitely more inclusive. But years ago, when I was younger, if there were any kind of like health ads, it was a white girl, it was a white girl with a yoga pants, her green smoothie. So when you're young, you just associate that with what you see it with all the time. Like, oh, I always see the salads and health food with white girls, not knowing, it's these types of foodstuffs are being kind of kept out of my community. So it was almost like a problem, but at the time I didn't even know the problem existed. It wasn't until I got older, I moved to Los Angeles. I was around a lot more, Caucasian people, like the culture was very different. And then you start to see like, wait, when I go, I moved to, I guess more gentrified areas. And then you see like, wait, these people they get all these like delicious, fresh, organic smoothies, these chia bowls. Like you get to see like, oh, we've been getting cheated all these years. So
what was your health like back in the day when you ate 4 meats and 1 burrito? You talk about this pretty extensively in the film, and it was a mess. You were a mess health-wise.
Yeah, yeah. I always say, I'm pretty open about it, like TMI alert for anyone. But it's funny because a lot of the things I was going through, you don't know their problems because you think, oh, this is just what everyone's going through. When I'm going through California King mattress size pads and having to OD on, menstrual pain medicine in order to get through the day, you just think like, oh, your cycle, you're supposed to be in pain. Or like even my digestive system, if it never worked correctly, I didn't know like, oh, this is supposed to flow smoothly every day. Like who knew? Like yeast infections and all these things, when they happen, you think this is just normal. You think, you see a lot of older people on their diabetes pills, high cholesterol, low, high blood pressure medicine. And you just think like, oh, okay, that's my destiny. That's just what happens. And then when I first, got into the vegan lifestyle, it was just like all these things that I thought were normal just started clearing up. And I was just like, oh, wait, my body is supposed to have a more balanced existence. So
You're not supposed to be in pain every month. Like actually, we've been taught that it's normal to have a really painful period. And we've been taught that, it's okay if you don't go have a bowel movement every day. And we just, what's normal is not healthy here in the United States. So what was it that your initial reaction to veganism was sort of, that's somebody else's deal, not mine. And you didn't even know that you could feel better. Who was the inspiration for your change, or what was the inspiration?
So Chef Babette, the owner of Stuff I Eat, it's a vegan restaurant in Inglewood, Los Angeles. I met her. I was so inspired, but I have to be honest, it was completely for superficial reasons. Like I saw her. If you ever see her body, it's insane.
Yeah, she's been on our show. She's amazing. She's worked with Dotsie quite a lot too. So on the
Her
Switch
skin.
everything. So I saw her and I was just like, wait. She has me by like 4 decades, but I want to be like her. So I asked her, like, what's the secret? What are you doing? And she told me, she was like, yeah, she eats a lot of raw foods. She follows a plant-based diet. So that's when I was just like, oh, sign me up, because I wanted to look good in booty shorts. But then after I did it, I got all these other benefits. And I was just like, oh, this is deeper than looking good in booty shorts.
Share with us what changes happened to you.
A few. So, my menstrual cycle went from being horrible to this like cute little friend that visits every month. I was all the yeast infections and stuff, that kind of subsided. Digestion was like smooth, lovely, scents that would come from my body, they lightened up as far as, breath, underarms, all those things like you feel self-conscious about, especially even if you're with someone. And I don't know, it's something about my spirit even that felt a little bit lighter, when you're not ingesting all of that, meat that has probably built up cortisol from the animals as they're, in fear as they're being slaughtered, we're eating that pain. So I definitely felt like a lightening of just my overall being on a spiritual level too.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine by this point, you have turned a lot of people vegan, just like Chef Babette did with you, but you didn't feel that way in the beginning. You say you feel like your black card got revoked when you became vegan. And part of it is the feeling like you rejected soul food. But what were some of the experiences that you had that first 6 months and your Black friends, family? What was the reaction? What were some of the things they said? What were they confused by? What were they frustrated with you about?
They made a mockery of the whole thing because it didn't help that I made this transition like right after I moved to LA. And so then it became like, oh, you moved to Hollywood and now you can't eat regular foods anymore, And again, they hadn't, all of the health benefits, they weren't told about it. So it just seems like, oh, she's just, she's gone off to Hollywood. Now she's eating what these actresses eat. I think that's how my choice was perceived. Okay. And then, and then the racial thing, because when you're coming from a place like DC, that's like mostly Black at the time, I didn't grow up around a lot of vegans. And then the ones that I did see, you know, they were usually Caucasian. And even when you see like the animal rights movement, it's not like you see a bunch of Black people there, you know, you saw mainly like all white people. So they just, the same way I did at first, they associated my choice with, she's trying to be a little white girl.
But you did make the movie The Invisible Vegan, meaning what I gather is that the invisible vegan are the vegans in the Black community, like you. So what was it that inspired you to make this movie?
So I like to problem solve. And, you know, one of the grand flaws I see when people, you know, they'll sit there and they'll argue about veganism with someone. And it's just like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is a waste of time, because this person already has like their own values. They've already have their own, you know, system that you're trying to fight. So if you want to combat that system, it probably won't happen in a one-on-one conversation if you're not an expert in anything. So that's why I'm like, okay, you know what? I can use my gift of film, and I can create something where I do have experts and where I do show them examples. It's not where they can like, you know, argue back and forth, where they're like not even listening to what I'm saying. When people watch a movie, they're receptive to information. So I think I connected. I wanted to like, I knew the connection was like veganism is a white thing. So it's like, okay, cool. I have to reformat that connection. I mean, I have to rebuild that connection between plant-based eating and culture. I have to show them like, look, Angela Davis does this, Coretta Scott King does this. People in Africa, like our heritage was not McDonald's. Like you're not being white if you go back to eating fresh foods. Like you're kind of going back to indigenous practices, which is all us. So that's what made me want to create the film the way I did.
I think a lot of the attitudes have started to change in the Black community, and how does that make you feel? Because you were kind of an OG. Well, Coretta Scott's an OG, but like a recent OG with changing your diet, inspiring so many others.
No, it makes me feel good that, you know, I love to see people where, you know, I love to see positive transformations. I love to see evolution. And I think in a sense, especially in this country built on just so much tension, I feel like we're just all evolving in so many beautiful ways. Like sometimes it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we're still a little bit behind, but I just see so much. When I look back at where my ancestors were 100 years, I'm like, I'm glad I'm here now. So I'm very happy to see minds being open, veganism being more mainstream. Like I couldn't get a veggie burger anywhere when I was growing up. Now you could just go right to, not saying like this is the best foods to eat if on a vegan diet, but just the accessibility. Now you can just go to Burger King, you can go to the grocery store and you're going to have vegan options there. So I'm happy that that's happening and my people are receptive to it.
Okay. I think it's great that you made this documentary, because after I saw your documentary, I really realized even more, because I have been realized, my eyes have been opened in the last 5 years. But how white centric the vegan documentaries were before. I mean, Dr. Milton Mills would show up and Tracy McWhorter would show up, both who were in your film, but for most part, it was very white centric. Some of the things you bring up in your movie are some of the roadblocks. We've talked about how it's veganism isn't our food, and that's one roadblock. Like you're giving up your Black card if you go vegan. But there were some other things you brought up too. One of them being food deserts. Yeah,
I brought up, you know, food deserts, like accessibility to this type of food. You know, a lot of people who are like, go vegan, go vegan. When is the last time you went to the hood and looked at their grocery store? Like even when I went to the grocery store, I noticed, wait, why is this produce is like shitty? You know, like it's horrible. You're not gonna have people who want to buy fruits and vegetables if their stuff doesn't look fresh. And when they do put they'll put organic food in certain neighborhoods. It'll be more expensive than Whole Foods. Like you'll go to in a economically low income neighborhood, and then tomatoes will be like $7. I'm like, they're not even always $7-8 in Whole Foods. So you see barriers like that. You also have to take into account like what people are going through in their lives. if you work one job and you come home to your nice, comfortable apartment house, you have enough money to, put clothes on your kids, eat what you need to eat. Of course, you're going to be receptive to a new lifestyle change. But you take someone else who's already living in a dangerous community, they're worried about their kids' safety, just getting them to school every day, don't know if they have enough money to feed everybody. Of course, you're not even in the space to think about food. So just being compassionate about, these issues that you're into, like animal rights and this and that. Everyone doesn't have the capacity or the luxury or the privilege to even take that on because they're just trying to get through the day.
So how can someone like I want to be inspiring about veganism, but what I heard in you have some really excellent experts in this documentary. So you accomplished that, Jasmine, but you also have a lot of your friends in there who add this really great vibe. They're trying vegan food for the first time, and it's like you're watching. It's like we're spying on your dinner with them. But how can I, as a white person, be more sensitive about extolling the virtues of veganism and not making it like it's so hard, because we want to be positive. So any tips for me?
Oh, I would say, not even as a white person, just anyone. Even for me, just a lot of people want to kind of preach the vegan gospel, but I always say like, yo, just remember, like sometimes when people start preaching at me, like I always say like, hey, just FYI, I didn't enroll in your university. Meaning like, sometimes I don't really like it when people just come trying to like tell me things. Like it has to be a thing first where we have a relationship where I feel comfortable looking to you as someone that I need to get ideas on life from. So making sure that relationship is in place. And I would also say like ask questions, before, telling someone what they need to do, like ask questions about their situation. And like sometimes if you ask questions and find out more things about them, you'll be able to like tell them better, have better arguments for why it's good to be vegan. You might be talking to someone and it's just like, yeah, my acne is like really getting out of hand. And then it's just like, you know what? My skin used to be a little OC and then I tried this vegan diet and it cleared it up. And like sometimes those little slips right there, that will be the thing that gets people to like try it versus like, let's have this big moral debate at the dinner table.
And also saying it's so easy. I think that was one of the points that someone in your film made, which I thought was really good. Because I always feel like I want to tell people that it's not that hard, but because I don't want to scare them about veganism. I won't, but at the same time, saying it's easy is a little too flippant. And I've learned that from your documentary.
Yeah. And then even when you say it's too easy, because I remember it was so funny because I did some Zoom event and they said it was so easy. And then one girl was like, it is easy, nuts and berries. And she like put that in the chat. And I actually called it out. I was just like, see right there. She wrote nuts and berries. If you are affluent, apparently you make cool money. Berries are expensive. When you go to
nuts.
Strawberries, you can go to a store and you can get like 40 hot dogs for like $5 that will feed your kids for the entire week.
Yeah.
Berries cost like $5, $6 and it'll only last you 2 days and won't feed the same amount of people. So even thinking like, both of my sisters, they both have 5 children each. So it's just like easy for some, it's easy, I'm a single person and I don't have any kids. Like easy for me is one thing, but you just got to think like, all right, what's this other person's situation? If you have 5 kids and you want to like overnight change everything you eat and they eat, like how does that work out? Are they going to be receptive to this change overnight? Is it that easy? So just really thinking about that stuff.
It depends on what you truly have access to. When I went to Chef Babette's restaurant stuff I eat in Inglewood, I actually was at her house. We were filming something, and she called the restaurant or the stuff, and she said, "Dotsie, you go pick it up." I think she did that on purpose. So I go to pick it up, and a lot of times you hear in food deserts, there's a fast food restaurant on every corner. And I was like, it can't be on every corner. It's on every corner. It was literally Taco Bell, McDonald's, a Burger King, and Crack in the Box. And I didn't see any grocery stores. And then she said there are some there, but like to your point, that very expensive for fruits and vegetables. So an extraordinarily layered problem. John Lewis's film, it really highlights this. They're trying to kill us, because I looked at those four corners and I was like, they are trying to kill them. If I mean, what the hell? So I want to hear from you, and I'm doing it again. I don't think it's 6 questions, though. I think it might be 2 or 3.
These are like nice questions.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, what is the work? This is a lot of work that has to be done, but what are some of the steps that you have seen work or be somewhat successful to mitigate, slightly start to get rid of food deserts, offer some fresh foods in food deserts? Like, what do we do and how can we help? And not white savior help, just how can anyone help?
Yeah, I think, I think if everyone is willing to, like, first, I mean, this isn't to solve the whole problem, but first, if people are willing to just do what they can in their own space. So for me, my space isn't, I'm not necessarily the stand in front of a car with a sign yelling, girl, not saying, but we need that person if that's what you're called to do, because that's, their space. My space is, I love film. So use my instrument to help. So I think with every person, like I've seen another lady, she's a photographer. So she would go to, all the factory farms, take photos, and then, so everyone could see what's going on. So like just being helpful in your space. And I think, honestly, one of the biggest things that I see happening now, not to the level that it needs to, but when politicians, when the government starts stepping in and making these policies, because before, segregation, all of these stupid systems, they didn't end because, like I made a movie or, all these little separate acts of activism, that pushed it. What really stopped it is when somebody like wrote a law and said, we're not going to allow this anymore. So I do love the fact that you're seeing people like, Cory Booker, like he's calling out like Popeyes, like he's naming names, fighting for us to put a stop to this, like Mayor Eric Adams in New York. The more politicians start to step up, I think that'll help. So people can start maybe writing their politicians like, hey, y'all need to speak up on this issue because it's hurting everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's empowering. Do what you can do in your sphere. Because everybody can take one step towards that after this podcast, quite literally. Thank you for that.
Yeah. You tell a really funny story that I laughed a couple times in this movie because you're so honest. It's really beautiful about your own journey. And so you share this story when you were working at a talent agency and an actress rescued a squirrel. And your reaction was just so funny. So tell us that story and your thought process.
So I always had, and I think, I can't speak for all people of color, like I'm not their spokesperson, but common thing, a little bit of animosity towards the animal rights community because of the fact that you see people fighting. When you're young, you see people fighting so passionately for the condition of chickens. And like, I remember when I was, I think maybe 7 years old, and I'm speaking before the DC government council, telling them like, we're cold and we're freezing cold in our classrooms and we're having problems learning. Like, can you guys please do something? And all the people I see fighting for us are Black. So, in my head, I'm just like, well, all these same people, how come they're not fighting for us when we need help? And you just have this like, resentment growing up. And so I think that kind of carried on to my early adult life when I was at a talent agency and this woman comes in and she's talking about, oh my God, I found this squirrel. I just had to do something. And then she was talking about how she found this like nice, they actually have this place in Malibu where they can go and they have like nice views and all this other kind of stuff. And that kind of triggered, my thought process around, animal rights and how they care for these animals more than people. And I think at the time, I took that personal, but I've definitely, evolved my thinking in that area. I understand it better, but yeah.
I wasn't laughing at that. What you said was something like, that squirrel's living better than me.
Yeah. Can I be reincarnated as a squirrel? Because clearly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the animal rights movement, because you do bring it up in your film about the cruelty to animals being a powerful reason to go vegan. But and I and my family have been in the animal rights movement for decades. And so it wasn't until recently that I began to see how we weren't calling in other people. Because I actually thought, and I'm bearing my truth here, is that I thought that the reason the animal rights movement was so white was because people of color had more important things that were more relevant to their life to fight for, which is probably true. But I didn't see the other side, which is also that we weren't calling in people of color at all. And I didn't see that. I didn't see that until the last 6 years, maybe. And now I'm noticing it. I notice it much more. And it's still an issue, I believe. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you changed actually in terms of your view of the animal rights movement?
So again, it's all about, like, sometimes when people who don't know your culture, who don't really have anything, don't really have anything to do with you. It's like you have no, say you're a white person, you have no Black friends or anything, but now that you have this cause, you want to come to us and tell us to fight for your cause, for your reason, when it's like, we're just like, why? But when I learned about animal rights from like a Black source, that was kind of what opened my eyes. And it's not, and it's just also, it's someone knowing how to talk to you, somebody who you trust, understanding what you're going through, saying like, okay, I know that you're dealing with A, B, and C, but taking my experience into account, but here's something else to consider. I think that really helped. And tying it into culture, like someone told me, they were talking to me about, even in Africa pre-slavery, there were countries where they ate meat, but it was more out of necessity. They prayed over the entire animal. Like it was one of those, like, you're thanking this animal for giving life. There was a spiritual bond between, the people and, the animals and the land. And like what we're doing now with our food system, this is not your culture. This is not, how you were. Culturally, this is not where your roots are. So to participate in this sadistic process is actually against who you are. And I think once someone kind of broke it down for me, because that's another thing, it's not someone talking at me. It's someone who understands me, understands things I care about, and breaking it down in a way that is relative and palatable for me. So I think that was the game changer. And I guess for my documentary, because someone said to me, like, you're losing the purpose of veganism. Like, it's mainly about the animals and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, with that person, I'm just like, you want people to do things for your reasons, which is why they won't. Like, I took the time, like, what's my audience? What do they care about? As sad as it is, and I don't like this, but they don't really care about the chickens. Like, that's just the reality. They care more about their grandmother being healed of her heart condition. They care about things that are close to home. So what I can do is I can, expand on these things that are close to home. And while I have their attention, just go like, oh yeah, and look at this cruel stuff that's happening to the animals. That's messed up too. Like, just knowing how to give people information is really important and overlooked.
Yeah, you had somebody, Christopher Sebastian, in your film, who is that his name? I thought what he said was very powerful. And he said, animal liberation is tied to Black liberation, to women's liberation, queer liberation. And I guess it's about us being able to look at it from all those different points of view and speak on it like that, share it from that point of view.
Definitely. Because as long as it's, in a sense, as long as it's okay to treat animals with cruelty, people sometimes they see others as animals. and that's,
Right.
and as long as we're allowed to treat animals poorly, it's just like, oh yeah, we could treat this Black man poorly. He's an animal. But if you just say like, no, it's not even right to treat animals cruelly. We just can't, we got to take out cruelty completely. Then, I feel like that mentality just serves, like he was saying, like it serves every movement.
Yeah.
I have a question for you about dairy and how many people of color have you had conversations with that are lactose intolerant or even realize that it's lactose intolerant and, understand that, and do they understand that they're the normal ones, that those that are not lactose intolerant were mutated, we're freakazoids, genetically mutated because we've been doing it longer, drinking dairy, that is, drinking cow's milk, that is. It's something that we work on at Switch4Good in a few different ways, and I'm curious as to your conversations and your relationships, how prevalent it is, how frustrated and not frustrated people of color are by it, and we know how much dairy is pushed on us, not only from their marketing but from our government and our school system and everywhere else we turn.
No, it's one of those, like I was saying before, when I was when I grew up in a low income community, I didn't see the problem with all these fast food restaurants. It wasn't until I stepped outside of that I was like, oh, this is a problem. Mm-hmm. Same thing with dairy in a sense, where it's like a lot of people are consuming dairy and they're having these problems, but they think these problems are normal. Whatever they're, the inflammation, really just painful gas, bloating, like all of these things are happening to their system. We are thinking, oh, this is just the normal, living pains. This is what everyone goes through. Like, I didn't know until I kicked all that stuff out of my diet. Like, oh yeah, these are all culprits. So
is it an education problem mainly?
Yep. It's an education. Like we're not taught. Like we're not taught that I mean, we grew up with that food pyramid. You see what's on the food pyramid. It's telling you, and it's telling you the dairy belongs on there. I remember back in the day when I grew up, it was like got milk mustaches. You go to school, the only thing you got water and you have a carton of milk that they give you at every meal. So it's pushed on us that this is good for you. This helps your bones grow. So we think that this is good. And then when bad stuff starts happening, we don't make the connection because our doctors aren't telling us their connection. Mm-hmm. Like when stuff does get bad, it's just like, oh, okay, go to the doctor. Your doctor gives you a pill. Your doctor doesn't say, maybe try cutting out this dairy. So a lot of people don't know that dairy is a culprit.
Jasmine, you'd be happy to know that actually Dotsie is working with government and Dr. Milton Mills, who's in your film, and others to get soy milk as an alternative to that carton of milk that was forced upon you as a kid, so that kids who are lactose intolerant or just don't want to participate in cruelty to animals don't have to take that milk carton or get a note to get out of it.
Right. Yeah. And then I mean, I don't know about you guys too. Like even with my meals, I didn't necessarily want milk. It's just like they feed us tater tots and they give us some milk. It's just like, why would these don't even go? This doesn't even make sense.
No, it doesn't. And in 2019, the USDA did a full report, and I think they skipped it in 2020 and 2021, but the obvious, but it was a report on the school lunch program and milk specifically. And their report says that 29.8% of the milk cartons, the pint milk cartons, were thrown away untouched. And they spent $2.1 billion on the school lunch program that year. And so dairy alone, or the milk alone, that 29% equals $300 million of yours and my money that would just flush down the toilet because the kids, they didn't want it. Now, why they don't want it, but if they had something else to try, kids are smart. Like, oh, I don't feel horrible after I have that, like it's just easy to connect the dots. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we could always give them little bottles of water too. Like what?
Hello. Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned you touch on it in The Invisible Vegan, but now you're producing a documentary called Red Alert about fibroids. It also touches on endometriosis, something that I had 3 surgeries for when I was vegetarian and consuming a lot of dairy. Tell us how fibroids are helped by diet and lifestyle, and a little bit about how you got involved with Red Alert.
So, my film is very personal. And a lot of the things I explored in, Invisible Vegan was very personal to me. So one of my friends, she suffered from very bad fibroids. And she noticed that when she wouldn't consume like meat and dairy, she was in less pain. She was never able to conceive a child until she went vegan. Finally, like for the first time, her body let her conceive a child. It did not come all the way to term, but that showed her, wow, there's something very corrupt going on with the type of food that she was eating. And I had another friend who went through the same thing. Breeze Harper, she's in the film, the author of Assisted Vegan. She talked about how she was like at work just in pain. And then she read Queen Afua, cleaned up her diet, and all the pain she was in kind of subsided, and she was able to control the fibroids. So Erica Taylor, I highlighted her story, and a lot of, in my documentary, The Invisible Vegan, and a lot of women with fibroids reached out to her, for help. So she decided that she wanted to direct her own project on the subject. So I definitely don't want to take the spotlight from her. Erica L. Taylor, it's her documentary, but I am, one of the producers on the project. And I'm looking forward to this conversation because a lot of women, when it comes to vaginal things, where a lot of us are suffering in silence.
And diet and lifestyle can really help.
Yes, diet and lifestyle. We're not being told. And even going back to, I've never had fibroids, but, there was a point where I had like cancerous cells on my cervix, in my, reproductive area. And the doctors they were just like, oh yeah, we can we'll have a small procedure, burn off a piece of your cervix. And I told them, you know what, before we do that, give me a few months. I fasted, ate nothing but like healthy, organic foods, no meat, no dairy, nothing. And I went back and they were just like, all of the cancerous cells are gone. So
and this is before you're vegan.
This at this time I wasn't following, because when I first went vegan, there were periods where I went back and forth and I like oscillated in the beginning. So after I had kind of, what's the word? I'm forgetting, blanking on the word. What's the word? Relapse. So after one of my vegan relapses, that's when I got the diagnosis. And they're just like, yeah, we're going to burn off a piece of your, organ. And then, I tried just eating fresh, got back on my vegan kick, and it was done. And so to me, that right there, it's like these doctors, I'm supposed to look up to you. Like, you're supposed to be guiding me. You were ready to burn off a piece of my reproductive organ when all I had to do was drink green juice and cut meat and dairy out of my diet. And I want to say this because this did happen. This worked for me. Anyone else who might be struggling with cancer, I do want to put a disclaimer out. I am not telling you to like cancel whatever you have going on, but I am being very honest about what happened with my situation.
Yeah. So for all ladies out there, the men might be interested too, but the ladies definitely are. I want to understand what you learned about vaginal infections, specifically yeast infections. Is as a professional cyclist sitting in a wet chamois, which is the pad that's sewn into our shorts that, helps with the padding from the lady bits to protect the lady bits. I had yeast infection after yeast infection after yeast infection for a long time in my career. I mean, it was like, I felt like I almost never didn't have one. It was like, it was like, get the wet chamois off the second you walk in the door, right? Like that helps some. However, I went vegan a couple of years before Olympics, and I didn't even pay attention to it at the time, but I had almost no yeast infections almost overnight. And I'm doing all the same training, if not more, during that period of time. And when I think about yeast, I think Candida, and I think about the foods that have yeast in it. And it's not animal foods, it's like processed plant foods. Yes. So I want to connect the dots to understand why a diet heavy in animal foods is producing more yeast and vaginal infections.
I don't know exactly the reason behind that. So I can't answer it, but it almost, in your vagina, like you have a balance, it's either alkaline, acidic. When you start eating a bunch of foods that aren't made for you, it's almost like it messes up your ecosystem. And I'll take this even further. So something else I noticed, this is wild. If I'm with certain guys who their diets are messed up and we are intimate, that will knock off my pH balance. Cause it's like if they're eating a certain, lots of sugar, lots of alcohol, lots of burgers, lots of milk, it's just like, okay, what their sweat was coming out of their pores is something that like I don't really come into contact with. So it's like, even their poor diets will upset me. So that's something else.
No, I think that's definitely, it's the microbiome. We talked about it. We've had a lot of people on the microbiome. We just had Dr. Robin Chutkan on, and she talked about how that, who you're in contact with affects your own microbiome. And Dotsie, remember we had Dr. Angie on, and we talked about, because my husband, Jasmine, wasn't vegan, and we decided that kissing him was not great for my microbiome.
And then he went vegan for the most part.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, if I tell him it affects my vagina that he's not vegan, I know he'll go completely vegan right away. So I think I have something to tell him. So
and meanwhile we're jumping, and it's crazy because we're jumping through hoops trying to rid ourselves of these problems, which can be very embarrassing for a woman, because no one's just telling us like, no, it's your vagina. Of course, what you put in your body is going to affect it. Start putting, put better stuff in there to keep your balance. The people you deal with, make sure if you're interacting with them closely, like they're balanced as well, because you don't want their body chemistry to throw off yours. So just keeping all these things in mind.
You're such a creative. Tell us about your kids' books and any other acting or directing, producing enterprises you're involved with.
Okay, so one missed opportunity is, I do not think we give little children enough credit. A lot of children, I created these. I already did a movie for the adults. So I was like, okay, let me do some little kids books for the kids, where it explains, like, one is Queen Vegana and the Magical World of Vegetables. And it's explaining, it's a queen, and she's explaining to her little princess, because at first her princess likes to just throw her vegetables out of the castle window because she hates them. So she doesn't like the way they taste. And so then her mom is telling her, like, no, carrots make you see really well. Celery helps with tummy aches. And so it's funny because my friends who read the books to their little kids, they've told me that their little kids are like, oh, I want spinach now because it's going to help me get strong. So like these kids are building this connection with vegetables. Like, no, it's not even, you want them to taste good, but it's not even about the taste. It's, if I eat spinach, I'll get stronger. So like planting those seeds in young children, so they'll want something better for themselves. I think it's a missed opportunity, and we're cheating kids when we don't tell them this stuff.
Where can they get your books?
They are both on Amazon. It's one King Vegas and Prince Parsley, and then it's another Queen Vegana and the Magical World of Vegetables. And then in the King Vegas and Prince Parsley, that one it takes it a little bit further than just food. It's saying, if people make you sad, kind of stay away from negativity, make sure you drink a lot of glasses of water. Like, it's just about overall health.
Can we get these on Amazon? I want to get them for my 8-year-old.
Yes. Yeah, you can get them on. They're both on Amazon.
Okay, I'm going to write them down. My mom, her grandmother, read her Bambi, and she went vegetarian like overnight, but she just caved with salami. So that's a whole nother question that Auntie Dotsie was like,
you know what? Like, as someone who relapsed a lot early in my journey, like I'm just like, relapses are okay. Like, I'm just like, they're completely good. Like, people get back on the wagon when they need to. So it's a life change. Like,
she's got some time. She's 8. So Queen Vegana and Prince Parsley.
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
Queen Vegana and the Magical World of Vegetables. That's,
Okay.
and then
Right.
King Vegas and Prince Parsley.
Vegas. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm sure a lot of our listeners also wanted to write that down again. Thank you.
And what's in store for you?
So what's in store for me now? So as far as a film that I am directing personally, like I'm working on a film called The Invisible Shame. And this one is about kind of the psychology around our relationships with food and looking at food disorders in a new way. So, traditionally, you see food disorders, it's the, white, affluent, heteronormative, usually female, wants to join her gymnast team. So she's like avoiding food in order to get to a size. But it doesn't always look like that. Like it happens in male populations. Like there's a whole culture around getting guys to make weight. We're taking these teenage boys, eat all this stuff so you can be this size. We are giving them eating disorders, or even people sitting at home when they are, eating stress, they're eating sadness, and they haven't made that connection that, this is bordering on disordered eating. So kind of shedding light on how else disordered eating manifests in populations that aren't usually spotlighted.
Wow, that's great. Dotsie and I both have struggled with eating disorders, and we interview people on this show also. So when your book comes out, so when your film comes out, we would like to interview you again and discuss that because Dotsie and I fit the typical eating disorder. There are many other kinds of people, reasons, and all sorts of pain that it
Yeah.
is
And
behind it.
I think people forget that mine was so much more about just acting out on my inner pain. And that was like the poison I chose. I also chose drugs and alcohol, but the anorexia was like, it was such a challenge, and I liked that. And then it was like, it was harder to not eat than like have some cocaine. And I got addicted to liking that feeling of that challenge, but it wasn't so much for me about being skinny. And so there's so many, I think people overlook that a lot of times eating disorders can be about acting out on inner pain. It's like, oh, just eat a cheeseburger. My dad must have said that 100 times to me, because it's just food, right? We all eat food. So it just doesn't seem like that could be something like sex addiction or alcohol addiction or drug addiction. Yeah.
And it's funny because you guys know like how, mentally taxing that is, how, just emotionally it can put you in a very funny place. So even me, like I want to explore this because as someone who is advocating for a plant-based diet, I want to know the correct way to talk to someone thinking like, what if this person is struggling with the eating disorder? And I'm coming at them, telling them they should follow a restrictive diet. Like that could set the wrong person off. So just being very conscious of like how I'm advocating for plant-based eating. And even there's orthorexia where people start off in these vegan movements and it starts off very well intended, but then it goes into an obsessive place. Like that's another eating disorder that a lot of people don't talk about. So yeah, just putting these things in the forefront so, more people know to look for them, how to avoid them. Yeah.
What a wonderful project. That is so needed.
That's great. I know for me going vegan, I had been hadn't binged or purged for 30 years when I finally went vegan 10 years ago. But one of my excuses for not going vegan was my former eating disorder. I thought that, the quote unquote things I would have to take out, the restrictions would make it worse, might trigger it. And I might go back to where I was when I was in my 20s. And I learned that actually eating vegan gave me more options and made me more, when I aligned my values with my diet, it just made me more at peace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've found that with the people with whom you've spoken.
Yeah. It can be a healing. It's just one of those things. It's all about how the subject is brought to someone. Cause definitely one of the ladies I interviewed, she said that like veganism helped her, but then you still have to be careful when you're working with certain populations. So yeah. And even me, I didn't, I think I suffer from an eating disorder, but I didn't know it was an eating disorder because I was in an abusive relationship, and I just started like binge eating food, and I would get laxatives to get it off my stomach. But I was never trying to be skinny. So I never put it together. Like, again, like I saw all the movies they were doing on eating disorders. So I didn't even know. I knew what I was doing was off, but I didn't know it was an eating disorder until later. So that's another. So I'm personally linked to this subject too.
Wow.
Well, I can't wait to see it. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and the incredible messages that you're sending out, and so many people that you're helping. You are probably going to be like Chef Babette, when you're in your 70s. You're going to have a whole bunch of followers, and you're going to be doing great things to change people even
all
in
the way
40 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen the blueprint. So I'm just like, okay,
I know, right?
I want to age like that. I want to live like that. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're such a joy. Yeah. Good luck with this film, and good luck with the Red Alert and everything you have going on. Hit us up again.